It had been 5 years since my divorce, and at 43, the solitude of each night had become a familiar companion. But that Tuesday evening unfolded in a way I'll never forget. I lay in bed, exhaustion enveloping me like a heavy, comforting blanket. The house was hushed, yet this time, the stillness felt different. A soft knock at the door broke through the quiet. "Leo?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper in the dimness. The door eased open and Leo stepped inside. He seemed unsure, standing there in his pajamas, no longer the attire of a boy, but of a 22-year-old man. A wave of protectiveness washed over me, mingled with an unsettling awareness. "I can't sleep," he murmured, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Come here," I said, patting the space beside me on the bed. He hesitated for a moment, then crossed the room and slipped beneath the covers. The bed dipped under his weight, and we lay side by side, a mere few inches separating us. His warmth was instantly noticeable, a presence that filled the space. I tried to avoid looking at him, but my eyes were drawn to the changes. He wasn't a child anymore. He had matured into a young man, his features more defined, his shoulders broader. The realization stirred a confusing mix of emotions within me, a sense of disorientation. "Mom," he whispered, turning his face towards me. "Sometimes I feel so incredibly alone in this house." His voice was laced with a vulnerability that tugged at my heart, and I found myself at a loss for words. Instead, I reached out and placed my hand on his shoulder. Without a moment's hesitation, he turned and embraced me tightly. The strength of his hold surprised me, his arms wrapping around me, his face pressed against my neck. I could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the warmth of his breath. But what truly caught me off guard was the instinctive way I found myself returning the embrace. A strange sensation, unfamiliar and unsettling, flickered in my chest. His face shifted even closer, his breath feathering against my skin. "Sometimes it's just too much," he murmured, his voice hushed and raw. "I'm here, Leo," I whispered, my voice thick with a tenderness I didn't fully understand. "I'm always here." But inside, I was far from composed. My heart raced, and I couldn't decipher the turmoil within me. His closeness felt overwhelming, even though his actions seemed, on the surface, innocent. Yet, the hug was tighter, the warmth more intense than I had anticipated. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, his eyes closed. Soon his breathing deepened and I knew he had fallen asleep. But sleep eluded me. As I lay there, still and silent, a single thought spiraled through my mind. What just happened? There was an undeniable intimacy in Leo's embrace, a connection that felt inappropriate. And even more unsettling was the fact that I couldn't simply dismiss it. When morning arrived, Leo was still asleep beside me. The first rays of sunlight illuminated his face, and I found myself lingering, gazing at him. He still possessed an air of innocence, yet I felt entangled, caught in a web of conflicting emotions. I rested my head back on the pillow, taking a deep breath. I needed time, space to process the events of the previous night. One thing was certain: this was no ordinary night. As the sunlight gradually filled the room, I realized the weight of the emotions that had churned within me all night still pressed down on me. Leo remained deeply asleep. I quietly slipped out of bed and made my way to the kitchen. I craved solitude, a chance to gather my thoughts, and the familiar, grounding routine of preparing something without disturbing him. Leo usually slept late, but today I felt an urgency, a need to soothe the disquiet brewing inside me. I began assembling ingredients for pancakes, and a few minutes later, Leo stirred. I caught sight of him peeking from behind the door, his eyes still heavy with sleep. "Morning," he said, his tone carrying a strange mix of weariness and caution. "Morning, honey," I replied, striving to project an air of normalcy as I poured the batter onto the griddle. I could feel his gaze on me, but it was different now. His usual casualness was gone, replaced by an intense focus. It was as if he was studying my every move, paying meticulous attention to everything I did. I stirred slowly, the warmth of the kitchen enveloping me, yet the unease within me was just as palpable. Leo's eyes, mirroring the night before, were fixed on me. But this time, there was a raw, undisguised intensity in his gaze. I noticed how his eyes weren't simply on me, they were tracing me, mapping the contours of my body, and I could feel it. I tried to ignore it, to brush it aside, but I couldn't deny the awareness that he had picked up on my discomfort. Deep within, my heart began to race, but I forced myself to remain calm, to maintain the facade that everything was fine. Leo's behavior had shifted. He was normally relaxed, easygoing, and cheerful around me. But now, there was a distance, an invisible boundary he had erected between us. It was as if he was gathering his courage, steeling himself to cross it. His eyes, catching the morning light, seemed to hold a message, a silent plea, though I couldn't decipher its exact meaning. I placed the stack of pancakes on a plate and handed them to him. "Enjoy," I said, my voice sounding strained, somewhat hollow. When Leo took the plate, his hands brushed against mine for a fleeting moment, and our eyes met. It felt as though he was trying to see something deeper within me, something that lay hidden beneath the surface. Without a word, he sat down at the table. During breakfast, he didn't meet my gaze directly, not even once. But each time I shifted, moved, or spoke, his eyes flickered back to me, drawn by that same strange, unsettling intensity. It was as if he was hyper-aware of every minute detail, every subtle nuance of my presence. This was uncharted territory, a dynamic unlike anything we had ever experienced before. My unease intensified, and a small voice within whispered that I needed to understand what was happening, to confront the unspoken tension that hung heavy in the air. But I still didn't fully grasp the nature of it. In the kitchen, surrounded by the comforting aroma of pancakes, the tension remained, thick and suffocating. Something was stirring within me, a confusing mix of emotions, but I fought against it, clinging to the familiar role of motherhood. This morning was supposed to be simple, a shared meal, a return to normalcy. But the undercurrent of warmth, that unsettling intimacy, was far from normal. As night approached, a heavy weariness settled over me, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that a fundamental shift had occurred. The loneliness in my room felt more profound, amplified by a strange anticipation. Leo's behavior had undergone a subtle but significant transformation, evolving into something else. I drifted off to sleep, though I remained restless, waking intermittently throughout the night, sensing that something was imminent, though I couldn't pinpoint its nature. Suddenly, a noise startled me awake. My eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the darkness of the room. I could make out a shadow moving slowly, deliberately. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized it was Leo. He had entered the room, his presence looming in the doorway, which was slightly ajar. My breath hitched, and my mind raced, trying to make sense of this intrusion. This was strange, deeply unsettling, and yet it felt strangely familiar, like a haunting echo of the previous night. But this time, the atmosphere was different, charged with a different energy. His eyes, his demeanor, the way he moved closer, each action carried a weight of intention. He took another step forward, closing the distance between us. The only illumination in the room, the pale glow of the moonlight filtering through the window, allowed me to discern his features more clearly. His eyes burned with a determination I had never witnessed before, a resolve that sent a shiver down my spine. Deep down, a primal instinct screamed at me to stop him, to put an end to this encroaching intimacy. Then, Leo leaned in, his movements deliberate and unhurried, and kissed me. It all happened in an instant, a suspended moment where time seemed to stand still. His lips, soft yet firm, pressed against mine, and everything inside me spiraled into chaos. This wasn't the kiss of a son. It was something else entirely, something forbidden and intoxicating. In that moment, my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silence of the room. I recoiled, pulling away breathlessly, my mind reeling. "No, stop," I said, my words barely audible, a trembling whisper in the darkness. Leo pulled back slightly, his eyes reflecting a complex mix of emotions, a flicker of disappointment, a hint of defiance. But he remained silent, a tall, imposing figure in the dimly lit room. "Leo, this isn't right. Don't do this," I pleaded, my voice trembling, my head spinning. My body was slick with a cold sweat as I struggled to regain control of the maelstrom of emotions surging through me. My son, approaching me with such desire. It was terrifying and confusing, a violation of everything I held sacred. Yet, I couldn't deny the intensity of his gaze, the raw hunger in his touch. But it was wrong. I had to be the mother. I had to draw the line. Leo stepped back, but his silence was heavy, laden with unspoken words. The room grew even quieter, the stillness broken only by the frantic pounding of my heart. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he moved closer again, closing the gap between us, and he kissed me again. His hands, which had been resting on my neck, slid down to my waist, then lower, to my hips. No matter how fiercely I told myself to resist, to push him away, I found myself unable to move. That night, the boundaries blurred, the lines between mother and son dissolving into a confusing, passionate embrace. The next morning, I woke up alone in the room. Leo was gone. I took a deep breath, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of my composure. I left the house without a word, a profound weariness etched into my face, an emptiness echoing in my chest. I felt lost, adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions, torn between my love for my son and the undeniable wrongness of what had transpired. The only certainty was that I needed to understand what had happened, to confront the truth that lay buried beneath layers of denial and confusion. I questioned my own feelings, my own desires. Why did I feel so conflicted? So drawn to him? Was I still seeing him as my child? Was I deluding myself? What was I supposed to do? The questions swirled in my mind, a relentless tide with no easy answers.